Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 9th episode of SecuriTEA Crumpets, where we host security professionals each month to talk about different security topics. Today, I am delighted to have Clint Gibbler on the show. Clint has a Ph.D. in computer science from UCDavis. Clint has worked as a software engineer, a security consultant, and was the research and technical director at the NCC Group. Clint is currently the head of security research at R2C, which develops a very popular static analysis tool, Semgrep, which we'll talk about today. Clint is the co-founder of the TLDR newsletter, which aggregates and distills the best content for security tools, blogs, which help you do your job better and faster. Welcome, Clint. Welcome to the stream.
Thanks for having me, Lewis. I don't know, like during your description, I don't know. I was like, I guess I'll just stand here and smile. But yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for being here today. So what I want to talk about today, so like obviously we're going to talk about Semgrep, we're going to talk about your security background, but first, obviously for SecuriTEA Crumpets, I like to do my research. I look at, person coming on LinkedIn, and obviously looking at your LinkedIn, I noticed that you once in your past life was doing things in improv comedy and now. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot about security today, but let's kind of lighten the mood a little bit and talk about what you were doing in the past and, just talk about that. It sounds really interesting to me.
Sure. Yeah. It kind of started by accident, to be honest. So when I was in high school, I really liked Whose Line Is It Anyway, which is a popular TV show with Wayne Brady, Ryan Stiles, and others, Colin Mockery. And I just thought it was very funny, very like organic, very creative. And it was something that I always thought would be really fun to do, but I never had the opportunity to. And then actually my freshman year of college, during the sort of welcome weeks, the improv troupe on campus had a show, and I happened to attend. And I thought it was like so amazing, so funny, and I just fell in love with it immediately. And at the end of the show, they said, "Hey, we're having auditions next week, so feel free to come and audition if you want to." So I was very nervous about it, having done basically no theater and no improv ever. But I went in, I auditioned, and happened to get very lucky and got on the troupe. We hypothesized that so there were a couple of other people who auditioned and made it on the same year, and we were all about the same height and had like similar sort of longer curly hair at the time. And we joked that they sort of let the three of us on at the same time because they liked one of us and they weren't sure which one. So they just had to let us all on at the same time. But yeah, so it's sort of I felt very lucky and very privileged to get on, and then I continued doing that all through college, so for 4 years, and I ended up adding sort of like a theater minor because I found that like doing more sort of like character work was very helpful for improv. So a lot of, I think, theater people do improv to help with their acting. I did acting to help with my improv, which I think is probably not what most people do. But yeah, it just became sort of like one of my favorite hobbies, and I continued doing it through grad school, and then I've actually did it for a few years in San Francisco as well. So it's something that it's probably one of my favorite things to do. But just started doing it randomly, but kept it up.
Nice. I have to say I have two questions to that. One is security related, and one is just what was your favorite one that you've done in San Francisco, like with your improv style?
Yeah, so there's a couple different types of improv, and then I guess there's like subgenres, sort of like how security is very broad and there's like many niches. Like improv also has sort of things within it. So there's a short form improv, which is kind of like Whose Line Is It Anyway, where you have self-contained improv games that have sort of like a structure. For example, like Irish Drinking Song is like a song that, oh, I guess also this is weird to say to you. Sorry, this is the name of the thing. I didn't create this.
Okay.
But it's like there's like a song with a structure and there's like a writing scheme, or there's like party quirks where someone comes in and the guests are all weird and the host has to guess sort of what endowments the audience has given to them. So short form is usually like pretty structured, like 3 to 5 minute sort of bits. And then there's a long form improv, which is more more theatery, less structured, more organic. And I ended up liking that style a little bit more because I think you have greater artistic flexibility in terms of you can sort of play with the genre a little bit more, and you're not as confined to this many people for this length of time, but rather you can maybe create a piece over like half an hour or an hour.
Got it.
So I don't know if that answered your question.
It
But
did. Yeah. My next question is kind of security related, but like I'm assuming something like improv would really help with like social engineering in some sense because you kind of have to be like quick-witted and you need to like think of things fast sometimes and have very good responses and good like kind of background stories around like particular things, right? So I could imagine like that being helpful in like a kind of social engineering perspective, trying to break into buildings or get behind people, getting like do like tailgating and such.
yeah, I haven't done actually that much of that work, but I do think it would be helpful for that. Actually, my friend Rachel Toback, who is fairly popular on Twitter for doing vishing and social engineering and things like that, and I think she got second in the DEF CON social engineering CTF for like 2 years in a row or something. Anyway, so she and I actually met through improv, and
Ah,
only later we realized we were like, oh, we're also both in security, so that's interesting.
very cool.
Uh, but yeah, I think she credits improv with part of the reason. Obviously, she also studies like cognitive science and psychology and a bunch of other things, which also make her better. But
Mhm.
I think improv helps.
Got it. Yeah, I remember seeing the YouTube video of her where she basically like had the crying baby video in the background kind of thing to be able to like get into someone's like I believe like either voicemail or change their like telephone like ownership to them or something, which is quite funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's actually awesome. I'm guessing anyone who watches this stream either now or on YouTube probably didn't expect us to talk about improv. So hopefully you learned something new because I did. I didn't know there was different types of improv, which is super cool. Um, so now let's move into TLDRSEC. So you are the co-creator of TLDRSEC, and I would say it's one of the more popular newsletters, and people love to see the content all the time. I personally love to see like a very condensed piece of information. So could you just explain what TLDRSEC is, because some people may not know what it is, and what was the backstory there?
Sure. Yeah. It's and also thank you. I'm glad you like it. It
I
always
do.
makes me feel good to hear people find it useful. Yeah. So basically, it's a free weekly newsletter that you can find at TLDRSEC.com, which basically just tries to take sort of the best new talks or blog posts or tools and sort of write like what are the key takeaways for these? Like what do you need to know and what do these things do? And put them into sort of one weekly email. So the origin of it is sort of by accident. I found I was at NCC Group at the time, and I found that I kept sharing like groups of links to people. I was like, oh, hey, like you just asked me about OAuth. Like here's like my 5 favorite OAuth links, or oh, here's some latest stuff that I found. And I realized, just sending one-off emails is not very scalable. And I found oftentimes I was sharing similar links with like many people. So it started just as a way to sort of scale something that I was doing already. Where I was like, hey, I'm already doing the work to collect these things. Maybe I can share it with other people and see if they find it useful. Um, and basically, what happens is I spend probably like 10 to 20 hours a week reading the best security articles I can find from, say, Twitter, Reddit, Hacker News. I think I subscribe to like 10 to 15 other security newsletters, so I also like read all of those.
Hmm.
And I try to make it basically the most dense, useful security thing you can read every week. At least that's my goal. I don't always achieve it, but that's sort of my target. Um, and yeah, the goal is specifically for like technical security people. There are a number of things that cover like, hey, here's like security events, here's the latest ransomware and stuff like that, and or here's the latest breach. And that's not really the focus. The focus is more like you're a security professional who wants to read about like technical security things, and so that's what I do. I mean, basically, it's the newsletter that I would subscribe to if I wasn't writing it. And Scott Piper had a summit route a number of years ago, which I also subscribed to and I thought was excellent, and in many ways was kind of the inspiration, I think, for TLDRSEC. And Daniel Miessler is something that I still read to this day. A friend who I'm a big fan of his newsletter as well.
that the unsupervised learning stuff, or is that?
Yeah. So Daniel Miessler's unsupervised learning, Marco Lancini's CloudSec list. There's a bunch of good ones, but those are some of my favorite right now.
Got it. So if you're watching this on the stream, we'll make sure that this is on the YouTube, those links, so you can check them out as well. So that's really interesting. So I also assume Route Summit was Scott is kind of really into AWS and stuff, so I'm assuming it was related to mostly cloud related things for the summit. Okay, got it. Cool. So we talked about what TLDRSEC is, but what a lot of people probably don't understand is probably the challenges that it took for you to kind of build a large audience. Because what were the early days of starting out with TLDRSEC? Were you daunted by like getting, let's say you released the first one, like how many viewers did you get in the first, or like, engagement, like clicks, people going through the website, etc., or like reading the email, for example? What did that kind of look like at the beginning?
So I think the first couple were sent out to about 30 people, or maybe like 10, that were mostly just friends of mine. That I was like, hey, I'm starting this thing, can I please add you? And they didn't actually sign up. I just like manually added them in MailChimp. I read a little bit, like I was like, okay, well, I've never really done regular blogging. I've never done a newsletter. So I tried to read some resources from people who'd done it, and sort of tried to learn some of their tips and tricks. And one of the things that they emphasized, there's a book from, I think, Pragmatic bookstore called like Technical Blogging Second Edition or something. And basically, one of the messages in it was like, if you're going to try to blog, or in this case, newsletter, like commit to doing it for a year, regardless of how much traction you get, before stopping. Because basically, like the first number of posts are going to get very little traction, and you can only, in most cases, start seeing whether this is actually going to be successful or not, like after a year. So that's kind of maybe depressing to think about. But I was like, well, this person knows what they're doing. I will also commit to like doing this for a year to see how it goes. And I would say definitely early growth was like super hard and slow. I think I told you about this previously, but one week I spent, I think, like 20 to 30 hours on this one newsletter. It was like number 10 or something, like very early. And I was like really proud of it. I was like so happy with it. I was like, this is my best one yet. I had all these great links. I thought my analysis of it was really useful. And I was like, yes, I crushed it. So I sent it out. And in the next few days, I got 0 new subscribers. And I was like, no. And like some people read it, but it was not like a crazy amount. It was like, tens of people, or like 100 or 200 people or something. And that was like, I'm not going to lie to you, I was like kind of depressed for like a day or two, because I was like, man, I spent so much time and nobody cared. And then, so contrasting that with like now, I would say on average, it grows, TLDRSEC grows like 50 to 200 like a week or so.
Oh, wow.
So it sort of depends, like if people share it, or if like it makes it into like a new pocket of people who haven't heard of it before. To be honest, the growth is like kind of a bit random. Sometimes it'll grow like 0 or like a handful in a day. A couple of days ago, it randomly grew like 50 or 70 in a day, and I'm like, I don't even know why. So the short of it is, if you want to do something like this, the growth rate is it's not exponential, but I would emphasize the beginning part of that graph, which is like very slow. So I think in the first 6 months to 9 months, it probably grew to like a few hundred. But now it'll grow a few hundred in maybe like 1 month. So I think concretely, I think I was at like 4,500 January 1st of this year, and then now I think I'm a little over 7,000. But so for like 35 or 4,500 to 7,000 in like a few months, whereas that was like probably a year and a half of time previously. So I don't know. I guess if you want to do it, commit to doing the work, and it's okay if it's super slow because it's always slow at the beginning, like for everyone. That's what everyone says, and I would concur.
Yeah, I have a friend who's been working on like building like a YouTube series, and I think they sent me like a screenshot of their how many viewers, how many interactions they had, how many like how what the length of the viewing time was and stuff, and I was like just like, don't look at that. Like the thing is, like, you're creating content because you think it's going to be useful, and you should do it for the process and the enjoyment, to begin with, at least, because you haven't found your market yet. You haven't found who's going to be interested in it. Like, it's fine. Like, you can just use it as your own reference. Like, well, I know what I'm talking about because of X, Y, and Z as well. So it kind of can be used for that mentality as well. Like the same for, like, I think this podcast, so SecuriTEA and Crumpets, it currently has, for the first like 4 episodes, it had maybe like 5 subscribers. And now, yeah, so I mean, 5 was great. I was happy with just
Yeah.
1, and it wasn't my mum, because she doesn't know how to use computers, so it's okay. And then obviously I still only have like 120 or something like that. But that's, I started in January. It's now, getting close to July, and 100 and something, where, I still think that's a pretty big achievement, regardless of.
That's huge. Yeah, congrats. That's awesome.
I mean, yeah, thank you. But yeah, so let's now move on to. So obviously, why do you think it's now growing so much? Is it because you're already at the peak of where there's so many people looking at it, and like being shared by, like, through mutual engagement, or do you just think it's just dynamically grows because of how it's being shared and stuff?
Yeah. So one thing is, and I think this was like a hard lesson for me to learn, and maybe for like a lot of the other sort of technical security professionals listening. But I would say having very solid technical security content is a requirement, but it's not sufficient. So for someone to share your work, it needs to be good, obviously. And uh, but just being very good doesn't make it widely shared. Like, for example, everything I write now is more widely shared than it used to be, but I wouldn't say my work is that much better than it used to be. Like, certainly doing it a lot has made me better and faster and more efficient, but I wouldn't say I'm like, my content is like 10x better than it used to be. It's just that you have enough people interacting with what you create, such that, say, if 1% of the people recommend it to someone else, like as that 1% gets bigger, then like your growth is bigger. So I wouldn't say it's like an exponential curve, but I would say it's maybe better than linear slightly, or at the very least linear, where the more people who are seeing it, the more likely some percentage of those people are going to share it. So again, no one's going to share it if it's not good. So like the base table stakes are that it's good. But that alone is unfortunately not, well, so over the long term, that is enough for it to be widely shared, but in the short term, it's not. So I don't know. I know, like, marketing people often talk about like distribution and like getting it in front of a lot of people, which as a technical person, I kind of like poo-pooed for a long time. I was like, this is young, naive Clint, as of, I don't know, like a year ago. I was like, whatever. If I write, the coolest new tool or blog post, of course everyone's going to see it. Answer: they're not, right? So, but what has helped is like, as you're growing, having like other people who are sort of influential or have a large audience, like see your work and think it's really good, and share it. So, for example, I was writing for probably like 9 months or a year, and then gradually Daniel Miesler of Unsupervised Learning came across some of my stuff, and we crossed paths at a couple of conferences, and we sort of had like some quick talks, and eventually we ended up like meeting up for coffee a few times, and he's given me a ton of advice and mentorship about building a newsletter, and really I think now we sort of help each other. But his like mentioning TLDRSEC or some of the stuff I write in his newsletter has been very huge for the growth of the newsletter. So I don't know. I feel like maybe I'm meandering a bit, but in
No, it makes
short,
sense.
like basically, like the prereq, like before you do anything else, like don't worry about copywriting or marketing or SEO or anything until what you create is like very good. Like that's like table stakes, like do that first. But then once you have something that's pretty good, gradually just helping it be seen by other people is very powerful, and really just keeping at it. So you said right now you're at like 120 subscribers. Like in another couple of months, it's going to be like 200, 500, 1,000. And then some percentage of those people are going to share it with their friends because they're like, oh man, did you see when Lewis like, interviewed this other person? And then yeah, that'll grow over time.
Got it. So I haven't, this is really off topic, but it kind of like, I think you might have some good insight into this. So imagine like someone is working, trying to get their name forward. They're maybe not working on their own content, but they might want to start producing like blog posts or something. Do you think using something like a kind of a guest? So I've been noticing a trend. So let's just use two. I'll use two scenarios. So there's the Portswigger blog, and there's also the SNCC blog. And I've seen a lot of people write guest posts for those types of things. Would you say like something like that would be a good starting ground for someone if they wanted to start getting their name known in the industry? Because I've been seeing that as a trend. Like definitely like there's like people springing up like doing guest iterations for like many companies, not just those. Those two are just examples.
Yeah, and I think Detectify and a few others do those as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I would say yes, but also I would encourage you to think about like what your goals are. So is your goal to have like one specific thing that you create that like people hear about more broadly? Is your goal to build an audience or build a newsletter or build some sort of subscribership, whether that's YouTube or I don't know, a podcast or something else? So one challenge of like, so I guess the sort of the naive benefit of writing on a already very popular thing is that they have a massive audience. So when you put something there, more people will see it. So like this is great. If you're wanting to also grow like a newsletter, podcast, whatever, like a more personal brand, it's not ideal in that people are not going to like your site or a domain or asset you control. So overall, I would say it's good. If you want to maybe optimize a little bit, you could say write like a very detailed, meaty blog post and put it on your blog, and then create sort of like a condensed version of it that has like maybe focuses on one section or is some sort of like a sort of subset of that, and then maybe shop that around to I don't know, Security Weekly, Tech Beacon, or one of these other blogs, maybe. Or if you just submit the full thing to this other, say, Portswigger, Detectify, SNCC, whoever, then maybe like have their thing link back to your assets, which you control. And then ideally,
sense.
yeah. So I would do that personally. So
Yeah.
also so a couple of people have like Mark Manning, Scott Piper, and a number of others are in flight for guest posting on TLDRSEC, and I have them like as the author, and I linked all their social media and stuff like that. So I'm TLDRSEC, I think, is gradually trying to become a platform for lots of people writing. But if your goal is specifically to become like a creator or have like a big newsletter or podcast or YouTube channel, I would say you also want some assets that you alone control that are ideally not tied to your current job, because you will leave your current job in some amount of time.
That was very off topic for me because because we were talking and it just kind of felt like the natural way to go in. So let's move away from TLDRSEC and we'll move into your background. So obviously, you were previously, for a period of time, you were a software security engineer, a consultant, then senior consultant, and then finally a research and technical director. That's a very good career promotional path, which you were at NCC. How did that path look for you? Because I'm sure like there's a lot of people that might feel that they are kind of like, at the lower end of the spectrum. Like let's say like they're a security engineer right now and they may want to be a technical director. How did that like path go for you from beginning to where you ended up?
Yeah, so I guess one thing that I'll give maybe like a handful of pieces of advice. So one is it's important to understand what the success criteria is for your current role and what success looks like for your next role. Like So to give you a concrete example, when you're a security consultant, and I'm sure you know this quite well, the sort of core value to you to your company is like how billable you are, like basically like how well can you deliver on projects. So at NCC, it's like associate security consultant, then security consultant, then senior security consultant, then principal security consultant. So for like the first couple of those, from like associate to security consultant to senior, like basically what you're doing is you're able to be sort of like a standalone individual contributor on projects. Like you can at first help a little bit on projects, then you can be a solid contributor on most projects, to you can lead projects. And also you can go from like, say, just one domain to multiple domains. So rather, you can do just web apps to you can do web apps, mobile, and like network. And then gradually you can take on sort of more ambiguous, more complex projects. So the reason I'm saying that is because I was very motivated. So coming from grad school, I was like, oh, I want to do research. I want to create tools, give talks at conferences. So I was spending a lot of time and effort as a security consultant trying to do research. However, to get to senior security consultant, it was pretty much just like the core criteria is like be a better consultant, like be able to lead projects, take on harder projects, and do like more types of things. So giving 50 Black Hat talks wouldn't necessarily get me from security consultant to senior security consultant. But that changes a little bit. So going from senior security consultant to principal, then it's like, well, not only do we expect you to be more technical, we expect you to also be like mentoring other people, maybe building out new practice lines, giving talks at conferences. So in general, I think what often looks like in many roles, like security engineering, not just security consulting, I think going from like junior to like standard to like senior, that's usually like you're becoming more technical. And then once you get to here, it's like, oh, are you like leading projects? Are you managing people? Are you like doing architecture stuff? So I think at the beginning, focus on like sort of core technical skills, and then you'll have a little more opportunity to branch out once you have a solid base. I've seen that in a couple of different domains.
Got it. Yeah, because that was kind of one of my questions, and I'm going to say it anyway because you might have some other pockets of goodness to share with the stream. So, in terms of consulting, as you just mentioned, one of the key challenges is balancing billability and research. I would like to know how it played out for you. So, that is what you just mentioned, your path, but like, what could you give to other people who want to also be able to do research, but they struggle to find the time within inside their job? What could, maybe if you could offer anything from that perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the short answer is it's hard. So whether you're sort of an internal security engineer or a security consultant and you want to do more research, or there's some like ambitious sort of side project that you think is going to be impactful but takes time and it's sort of difficult getting that time. I guess the biggest thing that I took to heart, which was not my insight, it was some advice some friends and mentors gave to me. I think David Nichols and Noah Badome and maybe Brian Solari, but a couple of people said a similar thing to me, which really resonated, is basically like, if you want to have a additional responsibility or role beyond what you have now, it's sort of like risky for the company to give that to you, having no knowledge of whether you're actually able to deliver on that competently. So let's say you want to be someone who's in charge of research or who leads research projects, but you've never really done research before. Like, that's very risky, right, to the company, because you have no evidence that you'll succeed at that. So this is sort of a long way to get to it, but basically, like, what is the role or type of thing you want to do, and prove that you can do that within your current role, and then them giving you that promotion or giving you that title or responsibility is just a formality. And I think that this applies not just with research, but really anything. Like someone who's like, oh, now you're our security architect because you've already been doing that role for 6 months, or like now you are our I don't know, head of this team because de facto you've been acting as the head of this team. So that's like the idea, but concretely, this is how I did it. I was like, okay, well, I want to get more research time, And in order to do that, like that's an investment the company is making in me. Like that is literally money they're not making because I'm like not on billable projects. So I was like, okay, well, I want to have a proven track record of writing blog posts and white papers and tools and giving talks at conferences. Um, in order to, it's sort of like a chicken and egg, right? Like, how do you get the time to do research when you haven't like done the research yet? So basically, the short answer is do it on top of your current job. So this isn't always possible, right? Like maybe you have a family you need to take care of, maybe you have other responsibilities. But if you're sort of young and don't have many responsibilities, which at the time I didn't, I just did more on top of my job. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do all my normal security consulting things. Also, I'm going to do an extra, I don't know, 10 to 20 hours a week trying to do research to then give talks and do other things to then justify me getting during sort of work hours time. So I did certainly have a lot of help because people like sort of saw these efforts and sort of gave me more research time, which I was then able to use to give more talks and write more content and things like that. But really, I think I guess let me try to like condense this down. So you want to do X, prove in your current role you can already do X, and then that'll gradually give you more time and flexibility to do X more in your day job. And then that becomes more like a part of your role. So for me, spend extra time out of work doing research, use that to justify in work time research. Make sure that whenever you get that, you absolutely crush it so that they feel like that was a total steal. Like we gave Clint 1 or 2 weeks of research, he knocked it out of the park. We should do that again, right? So like work to get the opportunity, and when you're given the opportunity, like over deliver, like make sure it's way better than expected, and then that'll justify you doing it more. And so for being a research director, I tried to like mentor and help other people doing research, and I did that for like a couple of months after the former research director left for another company. For another thing, NCC Group has research directors per office. So I was just for San Francisco. I was not nationwide or global. There were other people who did that, just for context. But yeah, so the other person had left. So I sort of tried to just, again, like in my own time, like help a bunch of other people do stuff. And then when they chose the next person, it's like, well, Clint has already been doing this, so it makes sense to have him do this officially because he's already been doing it anyway. So yeah, I'll stop, but that's some thoughts.
That's obviously a lot of food for thought. The only thing that I would see as being very risky there is that if you go and crush it by already pre-existing doing like a bunch of stuff, like let's say like you want to like do some internal research on a particular domain. Let's just say like browser stuff. You do research outside. You then crush that particular research topic. You then do whatever you need to do within the company, and then they expect you to do that again every single time. But because you already spent like let's say 30 hours doing it outside of work and then did it for like a 1 week project, that could also like then set yourself up for potential, not failure per se, but just lower what people might be then disappointed with your deliverables once you start doing it like in a 9 to 5 scenario.
Yeah, that's a good point where it's like, oh yeah, man, you did this, you did like an amazing job here. And it's like, well, yeah, because you gave me 40 hours and I spent like 100 hours, exactly. 60 of which were my personal time. Yeah, that's a great point. And that's still something that happens at NCC Group, and I'm sure everywhere, where to really do a good job with something, it would take, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks, but you're only given 1 or 2. That's always a problem. And I don't know if there's really a solution. But I would say getting at least 1 or 2 weeks of in office time does take down the burden a bit from like all of your just only personal time. So yeah, I would say it's not obviously like a solution, but I think it helps a little bit at least.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Okay, so let's move into, so you obviously you were at NCC for some time, but then you transitioned from consulting into R2C. And obviously we're going to talk about Semgrep very shortly. Obviously we want to be conscious of time. So you left R2C, you left NCC and joined R2C. What was your motivation for moving and excitement about like being the head of obviously research for a product company?
Yeah, it was It was a hard decision, to be honest, because I had a pretty sweet role at NCC Group. I really liked my work. I had amazing colleagues who I enjoyed working with, very cool projects. Um, I think what one of the motivations was, well, one is like when you're a consultant, you always need to be doing billable work. And I didn't dislike billable work, but I felt like it was not, to me, maximally interesting or impactful. I really wanted like a bigger impact on, I don't know, the industry. And there was also just like some tools that I wish I had. Specifically, I was like, well, I'm on these projects and there's some code pattern specific to this code base that's like kind of wonky that like if I see this, it's probably a bug. It's like, oh, is like there a controller missing an annotation? Is there like this one specific API call? If it's called with the argument that looks like this, it's like probably a bug. Um, and just like doing these like code audits and being like frustrated that nothing like that existed. And actually, like a friend of mine from grad school and I like did try starting to build like a lightweight static analysis tool ourselves. It turns out it's so much work. I think you've done some like custom static analysis stuff too, and it's very fun, but it's like so much work. Like it takes a lot of expertise and a lot of engineering time. And I actually kind of stumbled across R2C by accident. They were very small at the time. Not many, almost no one had heard of them. Some people had, but they had actually been focusing more on like academia than like industry. And but I managed to stumble across them through like a mutual friend, and I looked at Semgrep, which was actually sort of like it wasn't a focus of the company. Yuan, one of the program analysis team people, had like made it a little better during the Hack Week project. So it was like still like it only worked on Python, like kind of, and like PHP, like kind of, and like super broken. And like most of the things, if you've seen or used it now, like the things you like weren't there at the time. But I saw in it like this kernel of like this is the tool I wish I had at NCC. Like sort of like a diamond in the rough sort of thing. I was like, this is going to be great. And yeah, so I think having the opportunity to shape a tool, especially an open source tool that I wish I had, I found very exciting. And I had also never worked at a startup, and I thought, I'm still young. I don't have too many responsibilities. This would be a good point in my career to see if I like doing that. Um, and yeah, just having the opportunity to do a little bit of everything, I thought would be pretty fun too. So yeah, sort of a combination of factors, but it sort of was a very fortuitous accident in some respects.
Nice. So I want to be conscious of your time and obviously the streams. So